The fork clattered against my plate, breaking the silence that had settled over Vivian's dining room. I'd spent 3 hours making chicken pot pie from scratch, using Thomas's mother's old recipe. My late husband had loved this dish more than anything, and I thought maybe sharing it with his sister would bring us closer during this terrible time of grief. Instead, Vivian pushed her plate away with 2 fingers. Her eyes were cold when she looked at me across the mahogany table Thomas had helped her pick out years ago. "You really think cooking his favorite meal will make me forget what you are?" she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I felt my chest tighten, confusion mixing with the hurt that was already living there since Thomas died. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. She laughed, a sound without any warmth. "A gold digger, Marion. That's what you are. You married my brother for his money, and now you're sitting in my house pretending to grieve." I sat on Vivian's front porch with my suitcase beside me, watching rain clouds gather in the darkening sky. My wedding ring caught the light, glinting with memories. Behind me, I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Through the door, Vivian's voice reached me one last time. "Don't come crawling back when you realize nobody believes your innocent act, Marion." The words stung worse than the cold rain that had started to fall. I pulled my sweater tighter, wondering where I would go. My parents were gone, buried in the cemetery where Thomas now rested too. I had no siblings, no children, no family except the one that just threw me out. But sitting there in the rain, something hardened inside my chest. Vivian was wrong about me, and somehow I would make her understand that. The Sleepy Pine Motel sat on the edge of town, the kind of place where people stayed when they had nowhere else to go. My room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. When had I become this person? A 64-year-old woman with nowhere to go, accused of being something I'd never been. I'd spent my whole adult life as a nurse, caring for others, putting my own needs last. First, it was my parents, both requiring round-the-clock care for years before they passed. Then it was my patients at the hospital, working double shifts because someone needed to. By the time I met Thomas at a church function, I was 59 years old and had almost given up on finding love. But he'd seen something in me worth cherishing. I opened my purse and counted the money inside, $300. It wouldn't last long, but I had something else too. A small brass key to Thomas's safety deposit box, the one he'd given me 6 months before he died. "Just in case," he'd said. The bank opened at 9, and I was waiting by the door when the manager unlocked it. Mrs. Chun, a kind woman who'd known Thomas for years, greeted me with sad eyes. "Mrs. Dempsey, I'm so deeply sorry for your loss," she said, leading me to the vault. Thomas was a good man. My hands trembled as she brought out the long metal box and set it on the table in the private room. Inside, I found a manila envelope with my name written in Thomas's careful handwriting. There was also a letter, sealed with wax. I opened the envelope first and nearly gasped. Property deeds, stock certificates, insurance policies, and a will, all dated 6 months before his death. Every document had my name on it. The house where Vivian lived, the one she claimed was hers, was actually titled to me. The small business Thomas had run for 30 years, its shares were transferred into my name. Even his truck was legally mine. My heart pounded as I realized what this meant. Vivian had been lying to me since the funeral. Raymond Marshall, Thomas's attorney, leaned back in his leather chair and studied the documents I'd spread across his desk. "Well," he said slowly, "this changes everything." I sat forward, gripping the armrests of my chair. She told me the house was hers, that Thomas wanted her to have it because I was just his wife for a short time. She said the business went to her automatically. Raymond shook his head, his expression darkening. "Vivian has been handling the paperwork since Thomas passed, and you were grieving. She took advantage of that time to position herself as the executor, even though this will clearly names you as the sole beneficiary." The room seemed to spin slightly. "So, everything she told me was a lie?" "Not just a lie," Raymond said carefully. "It appears she's been actively working to redirect assets that legally belong to you. This could be considered fraud." I thought about the nights I'd spent crying in that guest room while Vivian complained about my presence. What do we do now? I asked. Raymond's smile was thin but determined. We take back what's yours. I stood outside Vivian's gate 2 days later. Through the windows, I could see her in Thomas's reading room. I pressed the doorbell, my heart beating steady. When she opened the door, her fake smile appeared. Marian, what a surprise. Did you forget something? I held up the folder containing the will and deeds. Actually, you forgot something. The truth. Her smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. You're clearly upset. Grief does that to people. Thomas left everything to me, I said calmly. The house, the business, all of it. You've been lying since the funeral. Vivian's hand tightened on the doorframe. You wouldn't understand what's best for this family. I am the family now, I said quietly. She slammed the door, but not before I saw the fear in her eyes. My phone rang at 11 that night. The caller ID showed the bank's security number. Mrs. Dempsey, this is Calvin from security. We had an incident today I thought you should know about. I sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. What kind of incident? Someone attempted to access your late husband's accounts this afternoon, claiming to be you. They had identification and signatures, but our teller noticed discrepancies. We've frozen the accounts pending verification. My stomach dropped. Do you have security footage? Calvin hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Would you like us to send it to your email? 20 minutes later, I watched the video on my laptop screen. There was Vivian, clear as day, standing at the counter with what looked like my driver's license. She was signing documents, her hand moving in loops that somewhat resembled my signature, but weren't quite right. She'd practiced, I realized with cold clarity. She'd been planning this. I picked up my phone and called the bank back. Calvin, I need you to freeze everything connected to Thomas's name. Every account, every asset. And I need copies of that footage sent to my attorney first thing tomorrow morning. When I hung up, my hands weren't shaking anymore. A strange calm had settled over me, the kind that comes when you finally stop being afraid and start getting angry. Dale Morrison's office was above a hardware store on Main Street. Raymond had recommended him, saying Dale was the best private investigator in 3 counties. We met at the corner cafe, somewhere neutral where we could talk. Your lawyer explained the situation, Dale said, stirring sugar into his coffee. You want evidence that Thomas's sister has been interfering with your inheritance. I nodded, wrapping my hands around my own cup for warmth. I need to know everything she's done since he died. Every document she's touched, every lie she's told, every dollar she's tried to take. Dale studied me for a long moment. That kind of investigation takes time and costs money. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Once we start digging, there's no taking it back. I thought about Vivian's face when she called me a gold digger, about sleeping in that motel room, about all the years I'd spent caring for others while putting myself last. I don't want to take anything back, I said firmly. I want her to face what she's done. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. Then you're going to love what I find. Dale called me on a Tuesday morning, just 3 days after I'd hired him. I was folding laundry in the motel's tiny room. Found something interesting, he said without preamble. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? The files he spread across his desk made my stomach turn. Bank statements, transfer receipts, forged signatures, all bearing Vivian's fingerprints in one way or another. She's been siphoning money from Thomas's business account since the week after his funeral, Dale explained, pointing to highlighted transactions. Small amounts at first, probably testing to see if anyone would notice. Then larger ones. She's taken almost $40,000 in 3 months. I stared at the numbers, each one representing another betrayal. Thomas built that business from nothing. He worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years to make it successful. And his sister has been treating it like her personal bank, Dale said grimly. But here's the thing, every transaction is documented. Every forged authorization, every fake invoice. It's all here. He handed me a USB drive. This is your copy. I'd suggest giving it to your attorney and possibly the police. I closed my fingers around the small drive, feeling its weight. Not yet, I said slowly. First, I want her to know I'm coming. The Spring Garden Charity Gala was Vivian's favorite event of the year, the place where she performed her role as a pillar of the community. She'd been organizing it for a decade, using it to network and gather praise. I hadn't planned to attend, but Dale's information changed my mind. I wore the navy dress Thomas had bought me for our first anniversary. Around my neck was the pearl necklace he'd given me on our wedding day. When I walked into the country club ballroom, conversations stuttered and died. People stared, whispering behind their hands. I'd been invisible at Thomas's funeral, just the grieving widow in black. Tonight, I was impossible to ignore. Vivian stood near the bar, holding court with the mayor's wife and several city council members. Her face went pale when she saw me, then flushed red with anger. I walked straight toward her. Well, she said loudly, that fake smile back in place. I didn't expect you to show your face here after everything. I smiled back, just as false, just as bright. You'll be seeing a lot more of it very soon. Before she could respond, I slipped a plain white envelope into her designer purse and walked away, leaving her surrounded by curious faces asking questions she couldn't answer. The envelope I'd left in Vivian's purse contained a single sheet of paper with 3 words typed in the center. I know everything. By morning, the real envelopes had gone out, sent by Dale to every local news outlet with documentation of Vivian's fraud. I sat in my motel room with coffee and a blueberry muffin from the gas station, watching the news on my laptop. The story broke at 6:30, right during the morning broadcast. Local businesswoman under investigation for embezzlement, the headline read. They showed a photo of Vivian from last night's gala, smiling and oblivious. The reporter detailed suspicious transactions from Thomas Dempsey's business accounts, forged documents, and an ongoing investigation. They didn't name me, but they mentioned that the legitimate heir had come forward with evidence. By 8 o'clock, my phone was ringing. Vivian's number flashed on the screen over and over. I let it go to voicemail the first 5 times, listening to her messages grow increasingly desperate. Marion, we need to talk. Then, this is a misunderstanding. Finally, please, you're destroying everything. On the 6th call, I answered. Hello, Vivian. You can't do this to me, she hissed. I have a reputation, a standing in this community. So did Thomas, I said quietly. Until you tried to steal everything he built. Vivian's voice shook on the other end of the line, all pretense of superiority gone. Marion, please, we can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding. I can explain everything to the investigators. Just tell them you made a mistake, that you were confused about the finances. I looked out the motel window at the parking lot. I thought about the chicken pot pie I'd made, about being thrown out in the rain, about every dismissive word she'd spoken. You called me a gold digger, I said, my voice steady. You threw me out of what was legally my house. You tried to steal from your own brother's widow, while I was grieving. I was upset. I was grieving too, she stammered. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt. Maybe, I agreed. But people also do things that show who they really are. You chose to forge my signature and steal money. You chose to lie about Thomas's will. Those weren't grief, Vivian. That was greed. There was a long silence. Then, quietly, what do you want from me? I don't want anything from you, I said. I already have what's mine. What you took, you'll answer for. I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang again immediately, but I turned it off. I'd said everything that needed saying. Raymond Marshall's office felt different this time, more like a place of victory than desperation. He set a stack of papers in front of me, each one stamped and official. With the forged documents exposed and the will verified, ownership of the property reverts to you immediately, he explained. We can file for eviction, given that Vivian has no legal right to occupy the residence. How long does she have? Raymond adjusted his glasses. Legally, we can give her 30 days. But given the fraud investigation, we could make it sooner if you prefer. I thought about it, about the satisfaction of rushing this process. Then I thought about Thomas, about the kind man who'd loved his sister despite her faults. 30 days, I said. But I'll deliver the notice myself. Raymond raised his eyebrows. Are you sure that's wise? She might react badly. Let her react, I said, standing. I'm done being afraid of her anger. 2 days later, I drove to the house, the eviction notice in a crisp manila envelope. Vivian's car was in the driveway. I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. This time, when she opened the door, there was no fake smile, just exhaustion and fear. I handed her the envelope without a word. She opened it right there, her hands trembling as she read. 30 days, she whispered. You're giving me 30 days to leave Thomas's house. My house, I corrected gently. And yes. The thunderstorm hit on a Wednesday night, the kind that shakes windows and floods streets. I was reading in my motel room when someone pounded on the door. Through the peephole, I saw Vivian, soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her face. I opened the door. She stumbled inside, dripping water on the worn carpet, her eyes wild. You ruined me, she screamed, her voice breaking. My friends won't return my calls. The charity board asked me to step down. The police questioned me for 3 hours. Everything I built is gone because of you. I closed the door quietly and stood facing her. I didn't ruin you, Vivian. You ruined yourself when you decided to steal from your dead brother. I needed that money, she sobbed, collapsing into the room's single chair. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain that house, to keep up appearances, to live the life Thomas had? Then you should have gotten a job, I said simply. Like I did for 40 years. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. He was my brother. He would have wanted me to have it, to be taken care of. If he'd wanted that, he would have put it in his will, I replied. But he didn't. He left everything to me because he trusted me. Vivian buried her face in her hands. What am I supposed to do now? Face the consequences, I said. And maybe, eventually, become someone Thomas would have been proud of. But that's not my problem anymore. She lifted her head, something desperate in her eyes. Please, Marion. I'm begging you. I thought about all the times I'd begged for scraps of kindness, all the years I'd put everyone else first. I hope you find peace, Vivian, I said honestly. But I'll never forget what you did. Moving back into Thomas's house felt strange and right at the same time. The rooms echoed with memories, but they were also full of Vivian's presence, things she'd moved or changed without permission. In the master bedroom closet, I found a storage key tucked into the pocket of Thomas's old work jacket. The storage unit was on the other side of town. Unit 42 was Thomas's, paid up for the next 5 years. When I opened it, I found it packed with boxes, all labeled in Vivian's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened the first one. Designer purses, still with tags attached. The second box held jewelry, expensive pieces I'd never seen Vivian wear. The third contained documents, receipts for purchases made with Thomas's business credit cards, transfers I hadn't seen in Dale's investigation. She'd been stealing for longer than anyone knew, squirreling away items and evidence in Thomas's own storage unit. I took photos of everything, methodical and careful. Then I called Dale. I found something you need to see. When he arrived, he let out a low whistle. This is more than embezzlement. This is systematic fraud over years, maybe since before Thomas died. Can we prove it? I asked. Every receipt has a date and signature, he said, already photographing the evidence. Oh, we can prove it. The reporters had been calling for days, leaving voicemails asking for my side of the story. I'd ignored them all until Dale suggested a different approach. Let people hear from you, he said. Right now, you're mysterious. Some of Vivian's friends are spreading rumors that you're vindictive, that you're exaggerating. One interview could change that. So I agreed to meet with Patricia Hughes from the local news station, a woman known for fair reporting. We sat in Raymond's office, professional and composed. Mrs. Dempsey, thank you for speaking with us, Patricia began. There's been a lot of speculation about your relationship with Vivian Dempsey and the allegations of fraud. Can you tell us your side? I took a breath and looked directly at the camera. I married Thomas Dempsey 3 years ago, and they were the happiest years of my life. When he passed suddenly, I was devastated. I moved into his sister's home temporarily while the estate was settled, trusting that we would grieve together as family. Patricia nodded encouragingly. But that's not what happened. No, I said quietly. Instead, I was accused of marrying Thomas for money, treated poorly, and eventually thrown out. What I discovered later was that Vivian had been systematically stealing from Thomas's estate, forging documents, and lying about his will. Everything Thomas left to me, she tried to take. The camera kept rolling as I explained calmly, without anger, just facts. I only ever loved my husband. He left everything to me not because I asked, but because he trusted me to honor his memory. That's what I'm doing. The segment aired that evening. By midnight, the station's social media was flooded with supportive comments. Vivian had become the villain of her own story. Vivian came to the house one last time on a gray morning that smelled like rain. She looked different, smaller somehow, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. I was planting flowers in the front garden, Thomas's roses that had nearly died from neglect, but were starting to recover with care. I looked up when I heard her car. She got out slowly, carrying a small box. I brought the last of Thomas's things from storage, she said quietly, setting the box on the porch. Things I took that weren't mine to take. I wiped dirt from my hands and stood. Thank you. She looked at the pearl necklace I was wearing. He bought that for you at an estate sale, spent 3 hours making sure every pearl was perfect. I know, I said. He told me. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I've lost everything. My reputation, my home, probably my freedom when the trial happens. You made your point. I looked at her, this woman who'd caused me so much pain. Did I? Or did you just finally face the consequences of your own choices? She had no answer for that. I know you'll never forgive me, she said finally. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I'm scared of jail or because I lost everything, but because I hurt you when you were already hurting. Maybe someday, I said honestly, but not today. The final estate settlement came through on a Thursday morning, delivered in a thick envelope from Raymond's office. Inside were deeds, titles, account statements, and insurance documents, all officially transferred into my name. The house where I'd lived with Thomas for 3 years. The business he'd built with his own hands. The life insurance policy he maintained faithfully. Even his old pickup truck. Everything was legally, irrevocably mine. But at the bottom of the envelope was something I hadn't expected. A smaller envelope, sealed with wax and marked personal. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter in Thomas's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before he died. My dearest Marion, it began. I sat down at the kitchen table and read words my husband had written, knowing he might not be here to say them himself. He wrote about his love for me, about how I brought joy to his later years. He wrote about his sister, about her weaknesses and fears. If Vivian ever turns cruel, the letter said, remember what I told you. She's only brave when she thinks no one will fight back. Show her you can. Show her the strength I always saw in you. He wrote about my years of caring for others, about how I'd forgotten to value myself. You are stronger than you believe, he'd written. Don't let Vivian or anyone else make you small. Don't let them convince you that love equals weakness. You loved me and I loved you, and that was the realest thing in my life. I carried the letter to the bedroom and placed it on the nightstand beside his photograph. It's done, I whispered. I fought back, just like you knew I would. And I won. The auction took place on Saturday morning at the county courthouse. Everything Vivian had purchased with stolen money was being sold to repay what she'd taken. I stood at the back, watching people bid. A handbag went for $200. A bracelet sold for $1,500. By noon, the auction had raised $47,000, almost exactly what Vivian had stolen. I approached the auctioneer and handed him a letter. This explains where the funds should go. The money was donated to Carolina Regional Hospital in Thomas's name, specifically to the oncology wing where he'd spent his final days. The hospital director called that evening. Mrs. Dempsey, this is incredibly generous. We'll make sure Thomas's name is honored. He was a generous man, I said. This is what he would have wanted. The local paper called it an act of grace. I called it balance. The first night truly alone in my house felt strange and peaceful. I walked through each room, remembering. The living room where we watched movies. The kitchen where he taught me his mother's recipes. The bedroom where we talked for hours. Everything was mine now, legally and emotionally. Not heavy with responsibility, but light with freedom. For the first time, I was truly independent. I'd spent my youth caring for my parents, my middle age working, and my later years supporting Thomas through illness. Now, at 64, I could discover who Marian was when she wasn't defined by who she was caring for. That night, I made tea and sat on the back porch. Revenge had tasted sweeter than expected, not because I'd hurt Vivian, but because I'd reclaimed something essential. My dignity, my rights, my voice. The knock on my door came early one Saturday morning, gentle and tentative. When I opened it, I found Michael, Vivian's son, standing on the porch. He was 32, with his uncle's kind eyes. We'd always gotten along well before everything fell apart. "Aunt Marian," he said hesitantly. "I hope it's okay that I came by." "Of course," I said, stepping back to let him in. "Would you like some coffee?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Vivian had called me a gold digger months ago. Michael wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "Mom's in a treatment facility," he said finally. "Not prison, not yet, but a place for people dealing with gambling addiction and financial problems. The lawyer worked out a deal." I nodded, unsure what to say. "She wanted me to tell you she's sorry," he continued. "She knows that doesn't fix anything, but she wanted you to know. She's in therapy, trying to understand why she did what she did." "And what did she discover?" I asked gently. Michael sighed. "That she'd been competing with Uncle Thomas her whole life. He was successful, happy, loved. She felt invisible next to him, so when he died, she saw a chance to finally have what he had. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about feeling important. I thought about that, about how jealousy and pain could twist people into doing terrible things. "Tell her I hope she finds peace," I said finally. "I really do." Michael looked up, surprise in his eyes. "You mean that?" "I do," I said. "But forgiveness takes time." Spring arrived properly after that, warm and green and full of new growth. I spent my days working in the garden, bringing Thomas's roses back to their former glory. Each morning, I'd go outside with my coffee and pruning shears, talking to the plants like Thomas used to do. The roses responded to care and attention, pushing out new shoots and unfurling petals in shades of pink and red and yellow. Thomas had planted them years ago, one for each important moment in his life. The red climber was for his parents' anniversary. The yellow floribunda marked the day he opened his business. The pink tea rose was for me, planted the week after we married. I added my own roses that spring. A white one for survival, a coral one for new beginnings, a deep burgundy one for strength. The garden was becoming something new, something that honored the past but grew toward the future. Neighbors would stop while walking their dogs, commenting on how beautiful everything looked. "Thomas would be proud," Mrs. Brennan from next door said one morning. "He loved this garden." "He did," I agreed. "That's why I'm taking care of it." One morning, while digging around the base of the pink tea rose, my shovel hit something solid. I carefully excavated around it. It was a small metal box, oxidized and weathered, buried deliberately beneath the rose he'd planted for me. I opened the box at the kitchen sink. Inside was a gold locket on a delicate chain. I cleaned it and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Thomas and me, taken at the church picnic where we'd first met. We were standing under an oak tree, both laughing. His hand was on my shoulder, my head tilted toward him, the beginning of something that would change our lives. On the back of the locket, Thomas had engraved, "For Marian, you are my calm in every storm." I sat at the table, crying, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of gratitude for the years we'd had, for the love we'd shared, for his foresight in leaving me this message when I needed it most. The locket became my most precious possession, more valuable than all the property deeds combined. It was proof that I'd been loved completely, that I'd been seen and valued. I wore it every day after that. Months passed, turning into a year, then approaching 2. I stood on my front porch one morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The irony wasn't lost on me. Standing in my own home watching golden light spread across my garden, the same woman Vivian had called a gold digger. But I'd never been after gold or money or things. I'd been after something much simpler and much more valuable: love, respect, dignity, peace. Thomas had given me all of those things, and when others tried to take them away, I'd fought back. Not with anger or revenge for its own sake, but with the quiet strength of someone who finally understood her own worth. The roses were blooming again, better than ever, filling the air with their sweet scent. The garden had become my sanctuary, a place where I could think and heal and remember without pain. I heard a car in the driveway and turned to see Michael getting out, but this time he wasn't alone. A young woman was with him, maybe 25, with Thomas's smile and Vivian's dark eyes. "Aunt Marion," Michael called, walking toward me. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is my sister, Caroline. She's been away at graduate school in Seattle, just got back last week." I'd never met Caroline, who'd left for college before I married Thomas and stayed on the West Coast for her studies. She looked nervous, clutching a small wrapped package. "Mrs. Dempsey," she said formally. "I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to meet you properly. Uncle Thomas wrote to me about you, told me how happy you made him." My throat tightened. "He wrote to you?" Caroline nodded. "Every month. Long emails about his life, his work, his marriage. He told me you were the best thing that ever happened to him." She held out the package. "I thought you should have this." Inside was a photo album filled with pictures of Thomas and me that I'd never seen. Pictures Caroline had taken during her visits home, candid shots of us laughing, cooking together, sitting on the porch. Pictures that captured the love we'd shared. "Thank you for bringing this," I said, tears in my eyes. "I'm sorry about my mother," Caroline said quietly. "What she did was wrong. Uncle Thomas deserved better, and so did you." Michael put his arm around his sister's shoulders. "We both wanted you to know that not everyone in this family is like Mom. Some of us are grateful for what you meant to Uncle Thomas." I stood in the garden that evening, the photo album tucked under my arm, watching the sunset. The journey from that rainy night on Vivian's porch to this moment had been painful, but necessary. I'd learned that I was worth fighting for, that my dignity mattered, that love shouldn't require you to diminish yourself. I'd learned that sometimes the people who should support you will betray you, but that didn't mean you were unworthy of support. Most importantly, I'd learned that it was never too late to stand up for yourself, to reclaim what was yours, to demand the respect you deserved. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee, carrying it to the porch where the story had begun. I touched the locket at my throat. "Look, love," I whispered to the morning air, to Thomas's memory, to the roses. "I'm home, really home, not just in this house, but in myself." A breeze stirred the wind chimes, and I could almost hear his voice in the sound. "Welcome home," it seemed to say. "Welcome home."